Continuing my series on the Ambleside Online books not to miss. We arrive now at year 3, and it was really hard for me to choose which books are not to miss because there are so many fabulous books on the year 3 list. My name is Joy. I am a homeschool mom of 7, and we used Ambleside Online from year 0 all the way up through year 6 until I switched to the CMEC. But I still go back to the Ambleside Online list frequently to see which books I don't want to miss. So I am sharing those with you today. Now, one thing to pay attention to is that some books that AO uses, they are used in multiple years. So you can check out my year 1 and year 2 videos to see which other books I say we should not miss. And some of them actually are also in year 3, so they would continue on. But so now let's look at the ones that we aren't gonna miss for year 3. So the first one is Drop of Water, and this is by Walter Wick. This is a really great science book that gives hands-on science activities for children to do. They have very vivid photographs and easy to understand experiments to do, and really it's very simple. It's just with water. And we have done this often with my 3rd graders, and sometimes it'll get pushed up to 4th grade. This is a really fun activity to do with your children. Now, an older student, maybe a 4th grader or 5th grader, could use this book as a science book that they would just go through on their own if you have a lot of kids and you're not able to sit down with them. But I recommend it as kind of a time for bonding and for playing with God's creation. This specifically is playing with water and watching how, you're like experimenting, you're putting a pin on top of the water, and there is a way that you can get the water to hold the pin as it's set, if you set it down correctly because of the surface tension. So there's just a lot of really fun experiments to do with our kids in this book. And it's a really great introductory science book. Now, this is also a part of a series. So I went to my local library and checked out some of the other books from this series. I didn't love them the way we loved this one, but I didn't get to see all of them. So I'd love to know if y'all have used the rest in this series as well. So the next book we come to is a biography, and that is The Bard of Avon, the story of William Shakespeare. This is a picture book, as you can tell. And it is by Diane Stanley, and Diane Stanley is known for her picture book biographies. One little note to pay attention to is as you're looking at the Ambleside Online lists, it will also often introduce us to authors or illustrators who are worthy of just buying everything that they create. And Diane Stanley is one of them. And actually, we're going to come to another one of hers in a minute. So you can see that each of the pages have these full color pictures and it gives a nice idea of what Shakespeare's life was like, and it endears us to him as a man, as a person, and not just for his work. Especially if you're just introducing your students to Shakespeare, this is a really great introduction. Another book not to miss is by Diane Stanley, basically just buy Diane Stanley's books. You're welcome. This is the biography about Michealangelo. And this goes through his life all the way to his death, starts with his birth. It gives a nice explanation of some of his most famous pieces and what his life was like while he was creating them, and some of the tension between his patrons and his ability to finish or not finish his pieces. So she was able to, it looks like she went through and reproduced some of his work. Or maybe that's the original. Yeah, it's probably the original. Next we come to the Pilgrims Progress, and I actually have 2 versions here, and I recommend both of them. This one has the original language, and it is more difficult to understand what they're saying. It goes in kind of deadpan order where one person will speak and then the next person will speak without saying he said or she said. So sometimes I just leave that part off if it makes sense with who's speaking, or I might add in said so-and-so. We did not make it through this entire book. My third grader did such a great job narrating and was really tracking with it. But it was more me. I had a harder time following what was happening and reading aloud and pronouncing the larger words. So I moved over to the Little Pilgrims Progress, and I have it on good authority that some of the Ambleside Online original OGs use this book as well. So I feel comfortable saying that both of these are great options. And if this one gets too complicated, you can definitely move over to this one. These are really great to ask for narration or picture drawing of a narration from the reading, because there is so much action that's happening in each of the little stories. And it's a slow read. You just read a little bit and then stop. It's not one of those books that you're going to gobble up all in, a couple sittings. It's nice to do it a little bit at a time, slowly. And if you're not familiar with the Pilgrim's Progress, Christian is the pilgrim who needs to leave his home and is starting to make his journey toward the celestial city. And there are so many images that come up in the Christian life about the pilgrimage of being a Christian, that this is such a foundational book to have read and to understand the imagery in, because then you start to see it in all of literature. So this is actually in the literature section of Ambleside Online Year 3. So and this is not one to hand to the kids to just go and read. In fact, all of the books in year 0 through year 3 are books to be read aloud to the student, because they are all going to be above the child's reading level. And then it will have at the bottom of each of the years, 4 additional reading practice for the child. And then it gives some really great recommendations for further reading. And you start to see that they kind of duplicate them in years, probably all through elementary. But it gives some options for students to have some worthy books to be reading on their own. But then also, these are the books that we're going to be reading with them, asking for a narration, doing more of a lesson with. So, all right. And next we come to the Jungle Book. And my husband got these fun books at an estate sale somewhere. So this is The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. And the Jungle Books themselves are a collection of stories about India. Now, Kipling himself lived in India as a boy, and these are some stories that were inspired by that. And what I love is it tells us how to say the names, at least this version does, explains the names. And the story for the Jungle Books is much different from the one that you will see the Disney version. And how it's different is that Mowgli has to come to terms with the fact that he was born a man and he needs to go back to where he came from. And then he starts to wrestle with this morality of what is right and what is wrong, because he has this loyalty toward the tribe that, really raised him. But there's starting to be a turn. The wolves, the baby wolves that he was raised with have now come of age and have been coached by Shere Khan to go against Mowgli. And so then Mowgli has to figure out what he's going to do. So he has a guide in Baloo and Bagheera, the bear and the panther, and they become kind of his mentors throughout, trying to help him get to the place that he needs to go, which is, of course, back with the humans. It's a great story. There's just a lot of bravery and courage. There is a lot of wrestling with what is right to do and what is not right. So you have that sense of moral integrity that he is needing to figure out. And then, of course, he goes to Bagheera and Baloo to help him discern what is right and what is not. And then, of course, he has his own childishness that he has to slough off because now he has to come to terms with the fact that he is growing up. So there is this coming of age part where he realizes he has to take responsibility and do the right thing, and it really is manning up in a lot of ways. So the next two books are The Princess and the Goblin and The Princess and Curdie. Now, The Princess and the Goblin is on the list, and then this is a companion book to The Princess and the Goblin. It's kind of like part two. And The Princess and the Goblin is about a little princess who gets into some trouble and needs to make some tough decisions to get herself out of the trouble she is in. And I'm just going to read the first little paragraph here to whet your appetite for the story, because it sets the tone for the whole book about what it's about and kind of where they're going, or where Mr. McDonald is going. Why the Princess has a story about her. There was once a little princess who... But Mr. Author, why do you always write about princesses? Because every little girl is a princess. You will make them vain if you tell them that. Not if they understand what I mean. Then what do you mean? What do you mean by a princess? The daughter of a king. Very well then, every little girl is a princess, and there would be no need to say anything about it except that she is always in danger of forgetting her rank and behaving as if she had grown out of the mud. I have seen little princesses behave like the children of thieves and lying beggars, and that is why they need to be told they are princesses. And that is why, when I tell a story of this kind, I like to tell it about a princess. Then I can say better what I mean, because I can then give her every beautiful thing I want her to have. Please go on. And that is where I'll end. And you can pick up with your own children later on. So grab a copy. Again, this would be considered, I'm putting this on the honorable mention list, that it's a fun book to put in your queue. And then the next honorable mention is A Child's History of the World. Now, this is a book that I assign to older students, and I read part of it aloud to some of my younger students. And it was fun. It was fine. But I felt like they needed to be a little bit older to really grasp some of the ideas. This says, author of Child's Geography of the World, headmaster of the Calvert School of Baltimore. Now, the Calvert School was one of the first homeschool curriculums. It was a send-away program with great books. And V.M. Hillier, he is a genius. He writes very artistically, and he has a really fun way of speaking that allows the stories to come to life. So you're saying, well, why not for a third grader? Maybe for a third grader, but you are reading it aloud. What I found was there's so much to it that I couldn't spend all the time I wanted to, going through, because we had some other things. We're skipping around in time periods and that sort of thing. But what I found was that if a student was reading through this on their own, maybe I start it with them, and then in fourth grade, they finish it. That seemed to be a nice balance for us. It is a great book for kids to just pick up and read on their own, but I don't think you have to use it as your spine. It's like I said, it's an honorable mention. It's really good. It's fun to have in your home. I wouldn't want to not have it. And then I pick and choose sometimes. If we have a certain time period that we're studying, I might come over to this book, see if there's some stories that would bring a certain time period, a certain person, a certain event to life. you know, now that I have a little bit older kids, upper elementary, middle school, then I can use this as kind of a short introduction. So that's all I have for the Ambleside Online Year 3 books not to miss. See you next time.